Hello, and welcome to our build guide for the famous Molten Strike of ZENITH Juggernaut. The Molten Strike is a melee skill, but most of its damage comes from the projectiles it creates, and more specifically the overlapping area explosions. You can also make the projectiles return back to you, dealing the damage again in an even more narrow area. The transfigured Molten Strike of ZENITH deals less damage than the regular version until you hit with the 5th attack, which deals 1000% more damage and creates more projectiles. It can only be used with two-handed weapons, which is not necessarily a downside, but limits your options quite substantially. The strength stacking approach uses various items or passives to add more benefits to this attribute. Usually strength only increases your melee physical damage, but with the Iron Will Keystone and Crown of Eyes helmet, it applies to all damage types for all attacks, so it affects the projectile component too. There are two sources of flat damage for this build. A very expensive replica Alberon's Warpath boots that provide chaos damage, or the much cheaper Shaper Influence sword that grants fire damage. At the minimal budget you can use any sword, and rely on the insane damage increase and attack speed from the strength alone. With a modest 1500 strength, you will increase your attack damage by almost 700% and attack speed by 200%. The Chaos version can utilize volatility support and wither debuff, while the Fire variant uses fire exposure, elemental penetration, and a tincture. You will have 7 endurance charges, tons of armor that also partially applies to chaos damage, reliable fortify buff for 20% hit damage reduction, and be immune to stuns and slows. The strength grants you maximum life, so it is trivial to reach 8000 maximum life. You will be very fast, but the area coverage is quite limited. Additional strike targets and melee splash greatly help with that aspect. The damage against bosses is insanely high, although it can be frustrating to wait for the 5th empowered attack sometimes. It is very cheap to get started with the Fire version, and you will have nearly infinite potential for upgrades when you transition into the Chaos variant. The unique helmet and body armor are necessary to escalate the damage bonuses from the strength, which this build relies on. The replica Alberon's Warpath is your end goal, but there are many cheaper alternatives. The Crown of Eyes is your core unique. With the Iron Will Keystone, it converts your melee physical damage bonus from strength into a generic attack damage bonus at 150% effectiveness and provides leech. Another important unique, the Iron Fortress grants you a lot of strength and improves your attack damage bonus from strength by 50%. It also grants plenty of block chance. Try to get the Corrupted Implicit that reduces the damage you take from critical strikes. A core unique for the Chaos damage variant. It grants you a great amount of chaos damage per strength. It averages out to slightly more than 5 chaos damage per 10 strength, but the volatility support is exceptionally effective for the wide range of damage it provides. It is very expensive. The Echo Forge is also a surprisingly strong option for a lower budget, which works very well when you don't have that much strength. You can also get the Corrupted version that grants Fortify support for your main setup, which saves you a few points on the passive tree. This jewel provides a large amount of strength and maximum life. You can also get the Intelligence bonus, which will greatly ease your other gearing process. You could path through a longer route on the passive tree to increase this bonus further, but you would need to sacrifice some defensive notables, which is not worth it. A very important jewel, it adds randomized bonuses to nearby notables. You should look for one that grants a chance to deal double damage, intimidate enemies, increase your strength, or provide fire resistance. This jewel is your main source of withered debuff for the Chaos version. It requires you to manually cast the Despair once every 10 seconds. At maximum potential, the withered debuff increases the chaos damage taken by 90%. You will use determination and precision, so you have access to a wide variety of useful modifiers here. Look for one defensive and one offensive modifier, but you can also specialize in one aura instead. This build is the exact reason why this ring is so insanely expensive, as you can combine the fire and chaos damage from your sword and boots into one for maximum efficiency. We didn't include it in the planner, but it is worth keeping it in mind when crafting your gear. With this ring, all your projectiles will return to you. dealing the damage again. It is very expensive, but it is worth its price. In the Settlers League, it can be replaced by Rune Enchant on your weapon. There are two possible setups, Fire and Chaos, but they are very similar in terms of your gear. The Fire version relies on a rare sword with a special modifier on it. The other gear pieces are identical, which allows for a smooth transition. You will mostly need high maximum life, strength, resistance, and fulfill attribute requirements. The attack speed and chaos resistance are also useful. The Fire version relies on a synthesized or shaper-specific modifier that grants fire damage based on the strength. A good roll averages 4 fire damage per 10 strength, which is lower than the boots, but also infinitely cheaper to obtain. Other than that, you will look for attack speed, elemental penetration, and a chance to deal double damage. For the Chaos version, you will also use a Shaper Sword, but for a different reason. You can get a 20% more damage bonus for skills socketed in here. Other than that, you will look for the same modifiers, such as high attack speed or chaos penetration. In the Settlers League, you can get an enchant that grants projectile return. It is very important to have additional targets for your strike skills, which you can get via Exarch Influence. Other than that, look for attack speed, maximum life, strength, and resistance. At first, you should use a rare boots that provide maximum life, strength, resistance, and action speed. The movement speed is not that important, as you will mostly use Leap Slam, but it can still be useful. You should look for a synthesized belt that increases your strength by 15%, which you can further enhance with catalysts. Use the Essence of Rage to get bonus strength until you get high maximum life and some resistance. The Fire version can also benefit from the bonus to elemental damage with attacks. Similarly, look for a special implicit that increases your strength by 15%. For suffixes, try to get both strength and all attribute modifier. Other than that, look for maximum life, resistance, and lacking attributes. Later on, you will want a simplex amulet with an increase to your strength, all attributes, and damage per strength, but it is very expensive. At first, you should use a regular amethyst ring crafted with Essence of Rage on a fractured base. As usual, you will seek maximum life, resistance, or other attributes. With a higher budget, you can look into a cogwork ring to get more valuable suffix modifiers. Get jewels that improve your maximum life, attack speed, and provide lacking resistances or attributes which you couldn't get without sacrificing strength. Aim for at least 2 attack speed modifiers. A two-handed cluster jewel can grant you martial mastery, which is a very generous source of attack speed. Try to match it with other useful modifiers, such as martial prowess. The Chaos variant of this build can use the Sin's Rebirth Flask to get the Unholy Might buff, which grants you a chance to inflict Withering debuff on hit. It is useful for clearing maps, but not reliable against harder bosses. The Fire damage version can use the Prismatic Tincture to greatly boost your elemental damage and get fire penetration or attack speed. To use Tincture with blood magic, you will need to allocate the Blood-Soaked Blade Keystone. For your remaining magic flasks, we recommend a set of defensive-oriented flasks. The Life Flask is not very effective with your vast maximum life pool, but it is very good for disabling bleeding. Molten Strike of the Zenith attacks with your two-handed weapon, releasing fiery projectiles that fall on the ground, dealing damage in a small area. Your every 5th hit deals 1000% more damage and releases 5 additional projectiles. The Fire version uses elemental support gems, such as Fire Penetration or Elemental Focus. The returning projectile support is only needed if you don't have the Nimbus Ring or Enchant on your sword. For non-Uber content, we recommend swapping Multi-Strike for the Awakened Ancestral Call for much better clear speed. The Chaos version uses slightly different support gems. To use the greater multiple projectiles support, you will need the Awakened version, otherwise it lowers the damage of your baseline projectiles too much when compared to regular damage support. Leap Slam is your main movement attack that allows you to move faster and jump over obstacles. You can also link it with other utility supports such as Fortify or Culling Strike, but it is not very realistic to keep it up during a fight with bosses where it matters the most. The Determination is a defensive aura that improves your armor rating. You can also use the Purity of Elements for easier gearing and ailment immunity. Precision improves your accuracy and offers useful modifiers on the Watcher's Eye Jewel. You can keep it at level 1 to reduce the life reservation cost. You will allocate the Blood Magic Keystone, so your main aura has to be supported by Eternal Blessing to remove the reservation cost. Your main curse is the Sniper's Mark, which greatly increases the damage taken by enemies from your projectiles. With the mark on hit support, you will automatically trigger this curse on every rare or unique enemy you hit with any of your attacks. The recommended guard skill for this build is the Molten Shell. It creates a barrier that absorbs large amounts of damage and improves your armor. You can also use the Val version for an even stronger barrier. With the cast when damage taken support, you will trigger this spell in dangerous situations. Remember that it can overwrite the Val version if it's triggered, while the stronger barrier is still active. Frostblink is your secondary movement skill. It is an instant teleport with short cooldown. You can use it without interrupting the Molten Strike repeats. The Flammability is your secondary curse for the fire setup. It reduces the fire resistance of affected enemies. You can automate it with cast when damage taken support. The Chaos variant should use the Despair curse. It lowers the Chaos resistance. You should cast it manually to trigger the Balance of Terror Jewel for Withering debuff. Blood Rage is a buff that drains your life but greatly improves your attack speed. You can link it with the Enhanced support, together with other utility setups. You can use the Withering step to instantly apply 8 stacks of Withered debuff on the enemy, which is useful for the Chaos variant. It shares cooldown with the Frostblink. Kill all bandits for the additional passive tree point, or help Alira for the bonus to all resistances. For your major Pantheon power, we recommend the Soul of Arakali, which greatly helps against damage over time effects. The minor Pantheon power is more flexible. The Soul of Shikari seems to be the most useful, as it will be hard to get high chaos resistances. The leveling process is very easy, although you won't benefit from stacking strength without specific high-level items or keystones. We recommend leveling up with a regular melee setup and transitioning to the final version once you reach maps and acquire all the necessary items. You can use any other melee skill you want, as the Molten Strike can be underwhelming in terms of speed without additional strike targets. The Smite, Sunder, or Volcanic Fissure of Snaking are all excellent choices. For more tips and suggested passive tree progression, visit our written guide on the website. The final passive tree aims to pick up all the essential keystones and notables while fitting in 2 cluster jewels and lethal pride. The Point Blank, Precise Technique, and Iron Will are used to greatly improve your damage. The Blood Magic removes the mana management and boosts your maximum life considerably. The Veil Pact provides insane life recovery, but it can be problematic against bosses that often disappear or become invulnerable. Picking up intelligence or resistance is not ideal, but it allows you to get more strength on your gear. The Mark Mastery grants you Culling Strike effect and generates frenzy charges against bosses. The Tribal Fury notable is also very important for your clear speed, as you will often kill weaker monsters with just the melee attack without waiting for the projectiles to fall down. We hope our guide answered all your questions regarding this build. If you want to see more of our work, consider leaving a like or subscribing to the channel. Thanks for watching and have a good day.